I'd like to pick up where we left off this morning, with the idea of primary metaphor and how primary metaphors fit together into larger, complex metaphors. Before I do that, I should mention one metaphor I forgot to talk about this morning, a very common one. We mentioned two of the metaphors for time. One of them is that time is a moving object, and the other one is time is a landscape we move over. But there's a third very common metaphor for time, and it is that time is a resource, like money. Sort of a time is money metaphor. So, for example, we have the idea of wasting time, spending time. You can say, I don't have enough time for that. I can budget my time. Okay? Budget my time very carefully. I can use too much time. Okay. Time is understood as a resource for doing something else, and in special cases like money like resource. And this is not a universal metaphor. It may seem strange to you in China, but this is not a universal metaphor. There are many parts of the world where time is not like a resource. In particular, Aboriginal cultures often do not have this metaphor. They don't understand time as something that you have to budget, that you have to not waste, and so on. Rather, they view time as just something that you live. You know, you just don't, there is no notion of wasting time or budgeting time or putting time aside for this and so on. People just live. In cultures like that, it is very difficult to set up a factory. Because to set up a factory, you have to have the idea of doing something in a certain amount of time. Paying people by the hour or by the day or something of this sort. And that is not necessarily a possible thing in every culture. So it's important to understand that some metaphors are universal and some are very culturally specific. And they may differ in all sorts of ways. Now, what I'd like to do now is go on from metaphors for time to metaphors for events. And there you have something very interesting happening. There are a lot of different ways to understand what an event is, metaphorically. And they're systematically related to each other. So, for example, I mentioned this morning the idea of a state as a location, a bounded region in space. And that is one of the primary metaphors. I mean, wherever you go around the world, states are bounded regions in space. Why? Why should that be? Well, think for a minute. You go outside, it's a sunny day. You want to be in the shade, get away from the heat. You have to go under the tree in a bounded region in space. That is, then you're cool. So being in a cooler state corresponds to being in a certain bounded region. And this happens all the time, constantly. Being in a certain state may correlate with being in a certain place. Similarly, if you want to change your state, suppose you are hot and you want to become cool, you may want to walk under the tree. That is, you may want to move from where you are to somewhere else. And change is understood in terms of movement, in terms of motion, from one bounded region to another bounded region. So a change of state is understood as motion from one bounded region to another bounded region. Again, a very common metaphor around the world. Then there's a metaphor for causation, an extremely common one, which is, again, a universal. Causes are forces. You push or pull or something like this. causation is seen as force. And causation is commonly understood in terms of forced motion. So if change is movement from one location to another, causation is movement, is a forced movement from one thing to another. So let me give you an example. Take a word like bring. Okay? I bring this, I give it to you. All right? That is, I am applying force to this, and it moves to a new location. Okay? Now, I can use the word bring, which is a verb of forced motion, to mean a cause. How? Take examples like summer brought winds from the ocean. Or Roosevelt brought America out of the Depression. Okay? That is, you can understand general causation in terms of a forced movement from one place to another. Now, what's interesting about this is that there are different kinds of forces and different kinds of movements. And for each type of force and movement, you have a different kind of causation. For example, take something like throw. I throw a ball. Okay? You can say, for example, that hearing that lecture threw me into confusion. Okay? Think about that. Hearing the lecture threw me into confusion, where the lecture is causing you to go from one state into the state of confusion. So a verb like throw can be a causal verb. Okay? Now, similarly, a verb like pull. Okay? You can pull on something. You can take a verb like pull and use it to mean general causation. For example, his psychiatrist pulled him out of his depression. Okay? There was no literal pulling, but you understand causation in terms of pulling, that is, getting someone to come in a certain direction from one location to another location. Pulled him out of his depression. So any verb in English, any verb at all, of forced motion can be a verb of causation. What is interesting is that the type of causation is different with the different type of verbs. There is no one type of causation because there is no one kind of forced motion. For example, if I bring you something, then I am coming with the thing. I also am going from one place to another. Okay? So, you can have a sentence like, when you say Roosevelt brought the United States out of a depression, Roosevelt was there applying, his causal force the whole time. The causal force occurred all the time. But if the lecture throws you into confusion, you can be in confusion after the lecture, not just during it. Or I can have a sentence like, the home run threw the crowd into a frenzy. After the home run, the crowd went into a frenzy, but the home run didn't continue the whole time. So the word like throw, when you throw, you apply force and then the ball goes by itself. Okay? That's a different kind of force. If I pull you someplace, then you come to the same place I come to. So if the psychiatrist pulled someone out of his depression, then the psychiatrist presumably is not depressed and is taking the same person to a non-depressed state where he is, the same location. You would not say the psychiatrist pushed someone out of a depression or threw someone out of a depression, right? So the idea is that they go into the same place. And each different verb of force for a different kind of force gives a different kind of causal logic. Each has a different meaning and therefore a different type of causation. Now, why does this matter? The reason is that philosophers and most people who used to do semantics thought that there was only one kind of causation. They thought there was just a concept cause and it was defined in one way. And what we find here is that there are many types of causation. As many types of causation as there are types of force and forced motion. And the reason is that causation is understood metaphorically as forced motion. Causation is fundamentally a metaphorical concept. And all the different types depend on the types of forces. Now, the metaphor I've just given you, I've given you three different metaphors that fit together. States are locations, changes are movements, causes are forces. Causation is forced motion, where you fit them all together. That is how you get a complex metaphor. It's called the event structure metaphor. It's the location version of the event structure metaphor. And it's complicated because you're taking primary metaphors and putting them together. And when you do that, you get even further metaphors. For example, actions. What is an action in this metaphor? An action is a self-propelled motion. It's a movement where you provide your own force. And we can see this in looking at the types of actions, the metaphors for them. So, for example, if you help somebody act, it's like helping them move. So you can say, it's smooth sailing, it's downhill from here. Or he gave me a boost, that is, he helped me move. Manner of action is like manner of motion. We're slogging through it, we're out of step, in step. Careful action is like careful motion. What is an example of a careful motion? Walking on eggshells. So when you say he's walking on eggshells, means he's acting very carefully. Okay? Treading on thin ice, acting very carefully. Okay? Walking a fine line, acting very carefully. So each of the kinds of careful motion can be a metaphor for careful action. Okay? Similarly, freedom of action means freedom of movement. So if you have freedom of movements, you can say things like, okay, workers, throw off your chains. As you move freely, that means it's not just that you can move freely, it's that you can act freely. Or you can say things like, I'm trapped in this job. Right? Trapped is physical lack of movement. Okay? That means it's physical constraint on action. So constraint on movement is the metaphorical basis for understanding trap, meaning a constraint on action. Right? It's the same event structure metaphor, where action is movement and freedom of action is understood in terms of freedom of movement. So what you see in these cases is something very profound, that the simple metaphors fit together to form a very large complex for thinking about causation, action, events, changes, and so on, all in one metaphorical framework. And this metaphorical framework is a universal. Now, in this metaphorical framework, what is a purpose? What does it mean to achieve a purpose? If action is movement, achieving a purpose is going to a location, a destination that you want to go to. So doing something to get something that you want is moving to be in a place you want to be at. Okay? So you understand this in terms of achieving a purpose is reaching a destination. That's why you can say, the goal. That's why you talk about goals, a goal that you want to get to. Or we've reached the end. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. We have a short way to go. And what does it mean to have a lack of a purpose? We don't have any purpose at all. That means you don't know what direction you're going in. So it says you're just floating around, drifting aimlessly. He needs direction. It means he has no purpose. So reaching a purpose is getting to a destination. In this, what is a means for achieving a purpose? A means for achieving a purpose is a path that you take. And in English, the word for that path is way. So you do it this way, do it another way, do it any way you can. Okay, the word for way is a path that you take to reach a destination, and it's also a purpose. It's a means for achieving a purpose. So starting out on a purposeful action is like starting out on a path. He's just starting his thesis. He's taken the first step. We're moving ahead. Let's forge ahead. We've come a long way, covered a lot of ground. All of these are understandings in terms of purposeful action, in terms of moving to a destination. If you look at the expressions in English for purposeful action and for events, you find that there are hundreds of expressions in terms of this complex metaphor, the event structure metaphor. And this is something that occurs around the world. Now, as part of this metaphor, there's another very important case, which is external events can affect you. That is, something that happens outside can cause you to do something else, can make a change in your life. So if achieving a purpose is reaching a destination, what does it mean for an external event to have a causal effect on your life? It means it's like a force that moves you off course, that moves you away. So you have lots of examples like that. Notice you say, how are things going? The word for these events are things. You can say, things are going with me. Means they're helping me achieve my purpose. Things are going against me. They're keeping me from reaching my destination, from achieving my purpose. Things took a turn for the worse. Things are going my way. Means they're helping me. They're doing force in the right direction I want to go in. Now, there's a second special case of this, and that is water or wind, fluids. So you can say you have to go with the flow. That is, there's an external flow of events that exerts force on you, and you can't do anything. You just have to go with the flow as much as you can. And you have something like, I'm trying to keep my head above water. It means you're in the ocean, you're about to drown, which is death. Failure is death. You're trying to achieve something, and the water keeps forcing you in one way or another. It keeps you from going in a direction. It makes it hard to achieve a goal. You can talk about the flow of history, the winds of change. That is, these are forces that are on you that affect where you're going to wind up in your life. So again, all of these ideas about events and purposeful action have to do with force applied to space and movement in space. Now, my favorite example of a special case of this has to do with horses. In English, there's an interesting set of metaphors. If you are riding a horse, or if you are in a carriage drawn by a horse, okay, the horse can move you independently and may not take you where you want to go. So you say, keep a tight rein on the situation, as if the situation were a horse, and you want to make sure things don't go in the wrong direction. Okay? So you say, keep a tight rein on it. Or wild horses couldn't make me do that. Wild horses is a very important metaphor in English. Or someone might say to you, suppose that you want to do something and someone else sort of comes and is very, very pushy and talks to you a lot. And you say, hold your horses, as if the horses were pushing you in a certain direction where you don't want to go. Okay? And then suppose you are doing something and the situation makes it very hard to do what you want to do. You may say, whoa, as though the situation were a horse trying to take you somewhere. You say, whoa, slow down. Okay? So these metaphors, this system, is a single whole system in which states or locations, changes or motions, causes or forces, actions are self-propelled motions, and purposes are destinations you're trying to reach. And it's a remarkable system. It's something that people use all the time. Now, one of the most interesting parts of this system is that it has a variant that is sort of like it, but not exactly. Remember on the time metaphors we had a figure-ground difference? We had times coming toward me. The time is the figure and I'm the ground. Or the times are on the ground and I'm the figure. Okay? There's something like that here with events as well. Consider a sentence like, I have a headache. Okay? It's a property I have. Now, it's also like a state you're in, but a state can be understood as something that you have or a location that you're in. And in English, there are some cases where you have both. You can have trouble or you can be in trouble. In trouble is in a state. Having trouble is like it's a property of yours. So if you're in trouble, the trouble is the ground and you are the figure. You're in trouble or out of trouble. In the other metaphor, you are the ground and the trouble can come to you. Troubles are coming my way, or my troubles went away. Okay? Or I have troubles. So notice it's the same duality. Now, in this, properties, that is, like a state, a property is a possession you have, like a headache. Now, change, again, is motion to a new location. So, I got a headache. I got it. It came to me. Or my headache went away. Gone. Or the noise gave me a headache. Causation is like giving. When you give something, you are using force and having it move from one place to another. Right? So it's like the headache is, like the noise is giving you this headache, and the aspirin can take it away. Okay? Removes the headache. So here, property of what you like. Are you sick? Do you have a headache? Whatever. You know, if you're sick, that is a property of you. The pill can take your illness away. Or, going out in cold weather can give you a cold. Make it come to you. Again, this is a dual version of event structure. And these two metaphors are like figure-ground reversals of each other. Now, what about purpose? In purposes, you have, in the other metaphor, you have reaching a destination. Here, achieving a purpose is getting an object that you want. Okay? How do you think about failure? If you don't get something, you can say, it fell through my hands. Right? That is, you went to get it and it fell through your hands. It's within my grasp. I can almost get it, almost achieve this purpose. Within my grasp. He has it. He got his job. Right? He got it. Okay? Now, there's a special case of this that's really interesting. And that is achieving a purpose is not just getting any object, it's getting something to eat. So, you talk about the fruits of his labor. He got fruits, he got something to eat. He savored victory. That the winning, victory, is something that tasted good to him. You can say, he almost tasted it. Okay? You can say, the opportunity has me drooling. It's mouth-watering. So achieving a purpose is getting something to eat, and seeing that you can almost achieve your purpose is like having the juices in your mouth flowing. What is it to try? Try to achieve a purpose. Well, it's trying to get something to eat. How do you do it? The traditional methods are hunting, fishing, and agriculture. So in English, you have cases like, he's hunting for a job. Okay? He bagged, that is put in the hunter's bag, a promotion. He's shooting for a promotion. Okay? He's aiming at a career in the movies. And so on. Then there's fishing. He's fishing for compliments, trying to get people to compliment him. Or he landed a good job. Or he landed a promotion, as if you've taken the fish and pulled it in onto land. It's landed. She netted a good job, as if you're fishing with a net. Netted. You have cases like, I've got a line out, like you're fishing with a fishing line. I've got a line out on a good used car. I'm trying to get a good used car. It's like fishing for it. You put out a line. And then agriculture. He reaped rewards. Reap is taking in the crops. The job is a plum, like a fruit, the fruits of his labor. It's ripe for the picking, and so on. So what you see here is a system of metaphors that fit together, a dual system, event structure system in which causes are forces in both cases, changes is motion, but there are two different ways of understanding states. States are bounded regions in space, or their properties are possessions, things that you have. And depending on which of those you use, you have different versions of these metaphors. All right, what this shows is that you can have very, very rich metaphor systems by putting together the primary metaphors. And then once you do that, you have lots of special cases of knowledge that you have about the world, knowledge about hunting, fishing, agriculture, that fit into these cases. And they are what allow you to use metaphorical language. Metaphorical language is when you put lots of different pieces of this system together, and you get something like, that job is a plum, or he landed a promotion. Right? And you can see the system only because you've noticed that the whole system is there. If you just looked at one example, you wouldn't see the entire system, but it's systematic. And what's remarkable about this is everyone in the world learns this system because they learn the primary metaphors. Okay? Just by living. They learn that states are locations, bounded regions, causes are forces, purposes are destinations. Why are purposes destinations? You want to achieve a purpose, you've got to go to a given place. You want to, get a cup of tea, you've got to go to the stove and heat the water. You want to, read a book, you have to go to the library and get the book. Right? So purposes regularly, every day in your life, correlate with going to destinations where you can do something. Or getting an object that you want. You want to eat a banana, you've got to go and get the banana, get the object. Right? So this is how primary metaphors work. You learn this primary system, and then you fit them together in this complex way of understanding the world. And then the language fits onto that. Okay? Now, there are lots of other variations on these, and I just want to give you a sense of how rich a metaphor system can be. For example, activities can be seen as things that move. So, for the example, suppose they're building a new highway. You can say, the highway is moving along. It's progressing toward its conclusion, toward reaching purposes or destinations, again. So when you're near the project, suppose you're doing a dissertation or writing a paper, you say, it's coming along. You know, how is your paper doing? Well, we're reaching the end, right? That is, any project or activity can be seen as something that moves, and when it reaches the end, then the purpose is fulfilled. Okay? Another one is that an action can be seen as a bounded region in space. So, for example, you can say, they pushed him into running for president. Now think about that. The activity is running for president. Causes are forces. That means they caused him, they exerted pressure on him, causal pressure, so that pushed him into, why into? Bounded region. He's moving into a region where he's running for president. Okay? Let me give you another example. He was drawn into the bank robbery. Right? That is, they put pressure on him and pulled him into the activity of robbing the bank. Or, I've taken steps toward canceling my insurance policy. Right? That is, you take some steps in the direction of this activity, which is seen as a location. Or, she came near to resigning her job is seen as a location, and she can come near from it and then back away from it. She backed away from resigning her job. So again, this is another variant on event structure where actions are seen as bounded regions. There's another one about a version of this having to do with existence. Existence is location here. And birth is arrival. We had a birth in our family yesterday. We have a new grandchild. Birth is arrival. The baby has arrived. 8 pounds, 4 ounces. Right? The baby is coming. Right? Death is departure. He's left us. He's gone away. Okay? But being alive, existing, is being here. That's why you come into existence and things go out of existence, because existence is here. Okay? So I wanted to just go through this a bit to give you a sense of the richness of this system. You always think in terms of this system every day. You can't think about purposes, about actions, about achieving something without thinking about goals you want to reach or things you want to get. That's how you think every day. You can't think about states without thinking about whether you're going to go in them or out of them or come near them or be deep in them or not. Okay? There's no way to think about these things any other way. Metaphor is crucial. It is normal. It is everyday, and it is in the way that you think. And the language attaches itself to this mode of thought. Okay? So, the general point, to summarize, is the most common things that you do, time and events and causes, every day, you understand via metaphor. The metaphors are natural. They're primary metaphors. You learn them just by living in the world. They're conceptual. You have language that attaches to those metaphors, usually to the source domain that's then used for the target domain, And you can see the metaphorical language, but the metaphors are in the thought. And then you can put metaphors together. That's called binding the metaphors together to form complex metaphors. Okay? Now, I'd like to give you a sense of another very complicated system. And this is the system of metaphors for the mind. That is, how do you think about thinking? And again, this is something you do every day. You constantly have to think about reasoning and think about thinking. And it's very, very common to do that. For example, there's a general metaphor about thinking, a single general high-level metaphor. Here's how it goes. The mind is a body. Thinking is bodily action of some sort, and ideas are the things you act with respect to. Okay? Examples. Thinking is moving. The mind is a body, and when you're thinking, you're moving, and the ideas are the locations. So that when you go from one idea to another, you're moving from one idea to another. So, you can reason step by step. You can reach conclusions. That's why they're called conclusions. You reach the end point of a chain of reasoning that goes through space. Your mind can race. You can go fast. Your mind can wander around, not going straight in the direction, but all over the place. You let your mind wander from idea to idea to idea. You can have a flight of fancy where you just fly off, think about random things. Flights of fancy. And you can say, suppose you're trying to prove something. You're in the middle of a long, difficult argument. You can say, I'm stuck. I can't go any further. Or you can be thinking in circles. You can have circular reasoning. It doesn't go anywhere. Okay. You get the general idea. A topic is an area. And ideas on that topic are locations in that area. That's why you talk about something. About means like around, in the area of something. So you talk about it. Suppose you're talking to someone and you're having a conversation and they think very fast. You can say, you're slow down. You're thinking too fast for me. Okay? As if they were moving or running too fast. Or you can say, I can't follow you. Right? Because following is being taken along some path of reasoning. Communicating something is guiding someone along the path. So the question is, do you follow them? And rethinking it again is going over it again. To rethink is to go over something again. Okay? So here you have thinking as moving, where the ideas are locations of the ground and the mind is a body. Now, there's another variation on this metaphor of the mind as body, and that is that thinking is perceiving. Knowing is seeing, as we saw before. Knowing is seeing, and ideas are things that are perceived. Now, what is communicating? Communicating an idea is showing it to someone. Okay? Attempting to get knowledge is searching. So let me give you some examples of all of this. You can say, I see what you're saying. Now, a cover-up in the government is an attempt to hide something from the public. That's why it's a cover-up, so the public will not know it. So you cover it up to hide it so it won't be seen, therefore known. So knowing is seeing. If you're writing a paper, you want to write it clearly. You want your writing to be clear so the other person can see it and therefore understand it. Understanding is seeing clearly. If you're writing a paper that is opaque, where no light can come through, then they can't see the ideas in the paper. Communication is therefore showing something. You say in the paper, let me show you how this works. Let me point it out to you. I point out this, I point out that. Notice this. Okay? Seeing is perceiving. Notice this. Pay attention to that. Do I have to draw you a picture? Or let me draw you a picture. Okay, so you can see it. You can talk about having a perspective on something. Seeing something from one position and then seeing it from another position. And they might be different. So the idea of having different understandings has to do with different perspectives that you can take. Different points of view. The notion point of view uses this metaphor. There's a point from which you view something. Okay? So, in general, this also extends to other kinds of perception, like hearing. You can be deaf to what your father tells you. That is, you don't do what he tells you, you don't pay attention, and so on. But in general, most of these are about seeing. And it's a major metaphor. It is used all over the place. Think about what it means for someone to be a brilliant student. Why brilliant? Because that person can shed light on topics and allow other people to see them and understand them clearly. Okay? So, when you see all these examples, they're almost overwhelming. That is, the system is so rich and consistent. It's a single, consistent system. Okay? Now, there's another variant on this metaphor of the mind as body. And there, thinking is object manipulation and ideas are objects. Thinking is doing this. So you can be tossing ideas around, right? Playing with ideas. Now, when you have ideas or objects, what is communication? Communication is giving the object idea to someone else. So it's like sending a message. This is the basis for what is called the conduit metaphor for communication. The conduit metaphor says ideas are objects, communication is sending an object to someone else, and language is the container you send it in. So you put it in language, and then you send it to someone else. Okay? Now, this is only a metaphor, but it is one of the major metaphors that we have. It is a metaphor that is used all the time. What is memory? Memory is like a warehouse where you store away your memories. And then you can go get them, so you can have, the memories can be stored in various ways. You can retrieve memories or recall them, that is, get them to come to you. So recall versus retrieve, you go to get them. So there are two various ways of understanding memories. And analyzing objects, that's another very important thing. What is analyzing an idea? It's like taking an object apart to look at its structure. So analysis, what is analysis? It uses this metaphor. It says the idea is an object that has a structure, and you can take it apart to see its structure. That's what analysis is. Okay. So in this, you have these very important metaphors, but let me stop for a minute because of the metaphor of for communication, the conduit metaphor. In the conduit metaphor, Language is something that contains ideas. You put ideas, the objects, into language, and you send that to someone else. Now, that has an entailment. It follows from that the meaning is in the words. Right? And that you should be able to just take the meaning, the language, and take the meaning out, extract it. It's false. It's not really true. The meaning isn't in the words. Right? Notice we saw before that there are ambiguous metaphors, where you have words and they have lots of different meanings in them, depending on the context of the situation, or both meanings at once. Right? But the reason we think that the meaning is in the words is that we use this metaphor. This metaphor is the basis of a lot of semiotics. The basic metaphor for communication in semiotics is the conduit metaphor. And there it's assumed that every word has an idea associated with it. It may not. Words are sort of prompts for thinking about things, and there might be normal ways of thinking about things, but other ways as well. Right? So this metaphor, the conduit metaphor, is not to be taken as literally true, or any of these. These are metaphors. And it's important to understand them. Notice communication in the first metaphor, where thinking is moving, is guiding someone. Communication in the second one is showing something. Only here is it sending objects. Okay? They're different metaphors for communication, and we understand them differently. Now, one of the richest metaphors that's in another one that's in this group of the mind as body, is that ideas are food, and thinking involves food preparation and eating. So in this, a well-functioning mind is like a healthy body. Okay? That's why they give you exercises to do. Ever worry about being given exercises as your homework? Why are they called exercises? They're to build your mind. A well-functioning mind is like a healthy, strong body. So they give you exercises. Ideas are food. Acquiring ideas is like eating. And interest in ideas is an appetite for food, and so on. So, for example, you can have a thirst for knowledge. A thirst. That is, an appetite for getting ideas. You can have an insatiable curiosity. You're curious and you eat and you eat and you eat. You think about more and more and more things. You want to know more and more and more. Okay? Insatiable. There are some ideas that you don't want to swallow. That you just can't swallow. You just can't get them down. Right? That is unsavory ideas. Ideas that don't taste well, don't taste good. Now, suppose you are just talking to someone, over the dinner table, or, out in the yard with someone, about something not very serious. That, in English, that is called chewing the fat. The fat because it's not nutritious, as opposed to the meat of the argument, which is nutritious. Okay? You want to get to the meat of the argument and not just chew the fat. And so, right? An idea may be so complicated that you can't digest it all, like this lecture. There's so much here that you can't digest all of it, right? Digest. But there's plenty of food for thought here. Food for thought. And then you have your exams. What do you do on the exam? You regurgitate the facts. It's like spitting them up, spitting them out. It's like you have food and you put them out. So regurgitating the facts on the exam is having a kind of exam where you just barely take it in and you give it back. It's not fully digested. Okay? So, now I should say one thing. English has a lot of metaphors for ideas or food, a lot of examples. But there's another language that has hundreds more. Can you guess what the language is? What? Does Chinese have a huge one? I'm not surprised. The language I knew of was French. But cultures that have a great cuisine have a very extensive use of this metaphor. So I don't know, I would love to find out the examples from Chinese. Maybe you can tell me some later. French has some wonderful ones. My favorite one in French is, that's an idea, au petit oignon, which means with little onions. It's a particularly beautiful idea. Tastes very good with little onions. So if you know little French onions, okay. Now, all right. Let me give you a few more of the metaphors for thought. There's one metaphor for thought that's extremely important and that confuses people a lot, especially in linguistics and philosophy. It's the metaphor that thought is language. And here, thinking is some sort of linguistic activity, either speaking or writing. Simple ideas are words, complex ideas are sentences, and fully communicating a sequence of thought is spelling. And memorization is writing. So, for example, you say, let me make a mental note of that, as if you're writing it on a pad. Let me make a mental note. You can say things like, she's an open book to me. Okay, as if you can read her mind. Right? So, thought is language. I misread his intentions. With thought is language. Misread. He has a whole catalog of great ideas. Right? And so on. Now, in some of these cases, the language is spoken language, not written language. So you can say, I can barely hear myself think, as if you're pronouncing the words. He's an articulate thinker. Articulation is carefully articulating the words with your mouth. An articulate thinker. She doesn't listen to her conscience. Listen, as if they're hearing the words. Her conscience told her not to do it. Tell, in language. I don't like the sound of his ideas. Sound. Okay? That sounds like a good idea. Okay? So what you have are cases where thought is understood as either written or spoken language. And there are other cases as well. For example, it's a very common expression in English to say, that's Greek to me. It means I don't understand it. Means like I don't speak Greek. Okay? Or liberals and conservatives don't speak the same language. It means they don't think in the same way. You can say, she cannot translate her ideas into well-defined plans. Translate ideas into plans, as if they were words. His thoughts are eloquent. Eloquence has to do with speaking and pronouncing. Okay? What is the vocabulary of philosophical ideas? It's as though ideas were words and there was a vocabulary of them. The argument is abbreviated, as if there's an abbreviation, a short version. It's cut short. He's reading between the lines, right? As if he means he understands something that's not said. He understands an idea that isn't communicated. My favorite is he's computer literate. Literate, as if he can read the writing. Okay. So in general, we have a very rich metaphor of thought as language. And it's very common, therefore, when you're studying linguistics, to misunderstand that, to take that metaphor literally. And when you're speaking about thought, to act as if it's language. Right? And it isn't. You've got to keep language and thought separate. Language has to do with the phonological expression of the thoughts. Another metaphor that's very common for thinking is that thinking is mathematical calculation, like addition. So you put two and two together. Okay? Reasoning is adding. You say, what does all this add up to? I can say at the end of my lecture, let me summarize, sum, like in addition. Right? Let me summarize. Let me tell you what it adds up to. Okay? I can say, let me give you an account of the history of metaphor. An account is like accounting, where you put down all the numbers and see what they add up to and how they fit together, how they add up. That's what an account is. So here you see, and my favorite one is, that doesn't count. I'm not going to count it in there. I'm not going to put it in my accounting and in the sum to see what it adds up to. We won't let that count. It can't come into the argument. Okay? Now, very important, we have a little metaphor, and it says, thought is mathematical calculation. The last one I'll give you is that the mind is a machine. The mind is a machine. And ideas are the products of that machine. And thinking is an automated process, step by step, putting the ideas together to get a complex idea. Okay? Normal thought is the normal operation of the machine, and inability to think is the failure of the machine to function. So, you say things like, I'm a little rusty today. Rusty means there's rust on the machine and it doesn't work very well. So when you say I'm a little rusty, means I'm thinking slowly. Right? The machine is rusty. Or you can say, boy, the wheels are turning now. I have ideas coming out really fast. The wheels are turning. Or you can talk about a mental breakdown, as if the machine were breaking down. Okay? So those are part of the system of metaphors for thought. And again, what you find is if you have an important area of your life, there's not just one metaphor for it, there are lots of different ones. And they're all different. They all have different modes of reasoning. They're about different subject matter. They mean different things. Now, what I would like to point out at this point is something very deep. If you take those metaphors that I just gave you for thinking, and you put them together and you make a list of them, there are certain parts of them that constitute a philosophy. It is Anglo-American philosophy. Right? That's part of this metaphor. That idea is the basis of all analytic philosophy. That thoughts are independent of any thinkers, that they're really things out there in the world, in the universe. It's part of the philosophy. You can talk about thoughts and analyze them without worrying about the person who's thinking, without worrying about the mind or the brain or anything else. Similarly, in this metaphor, the mind is body, thoughts correspond to things in the world. That's like the correspondence theory of truth, that the thoughts can fit the world. Take thought as motion, where you're moving. Rational thought is direct, deliberate, step-by-step motion. And that's, in analytic philosophy, that's what rational thought is. It's direct, deliberate, step-by-step motion. Okay? Go to the metaphor of thought as object manipulation. Okay? Well, in that, the thoughts are objectively existing things, therefore they're the same for everyone. It says that ideas are universal. That is part of analytic philosophy. Since the ideas are things that are objective out there in the world, they're the same for everybody. That's one of the assumptions of Anglo-American philosophy. Communication is sending ideas. That's part of Anglo-American philosophy. The structure of a thought is like the structure of an object, and analyzing thoughts is taking apart objects. That's why it's called analytic philosophy. You're analyzing language by taking it into its parts. And that's what analytic philosophers are trained to do language analysis, breaking a language down into parts, giving necessary and sufficient conditions for concepts, for example. Now, take the metaphor of thought as mathematical calculation. Well, just as numbers can be accurately represented by sequences of written symbols, so thoughts can also be adequately represented by sequences of written symbols. Okay? That means that you can have a symbolic logic where you can write down a thought, as in symbolic logic. Just as mathematical calculation is a mechanical process, like by an algorithm, so thought is an automatic process, and in logic, you have rules of thought that apply automatically, from one formula to the next formula to the next formula. Just as there are some systematic universal principles of mathematical calculation that work step by step, so there are systematic universal principles of reason that work step by step. This is what a logic is. A logic is a set of principles of reasoning. They work step by step. And just as numbers and mathematics are seen as universal, so thoughts and reason are seen as universal. So all of that is part of analytic philosophy. And finally, the mind is a machine. Each complex thought, according to this metaphor, has a structure imposed by mechanically putting together simple thoughts in a regular, describable, step-by-step fashion. And that is what analytic philosophy says. It's called compositionality, that you put together thoughts in a step-by-step fashion. You put together ideas. Okay? So, what's interesting about this is that analytic philosophy denies the existence of conceptual metaphor. But all of it is based on conceptual metaphor. It's an ironic position. But it's interesting. All of these metaphors are common metaphors. And when you put them together in this odd way, they're all different, but you put them together, you get a philosophy that seems natural to many people. Analytic philosophy seems like a natural kind of thing to believe. Why? Because you already have the metaphors in your mind. What that means is that if you are going to challenge analytic philosophy, as you must if you're doing cognitive linguistics is inconsistent with analytic philosophy, because analytic philosophy says there's no metaphor. The meaning is just the relationship between words and the world. In that case, you have to notice when you're using the metaphors and when philosophers are using the metaphors. Right? Very important thing to do. So if you're reading around in linguistics or philosophy of language is mainly analytic philosophy. And it assumes that language works in this way. Right? So what you're going to get are a lot of statements that are inconsistent with most of the facts of cognitive linguistics. Right? important to do that. Okay. I could go through more. We have a large book. I won't. But I wanted to give you that sense, at least, of this. And I wanted to talk about a few more things. One of the things I wanted to talk about is to give you examples of how metaphor interacts with image schemas, how it interacts with prepositions and uses of prepositions. And to do that, let me go and get some examples out of this book, but you can make them up any way you like. Let me give you an example. There's a difference between looking over something and overlooking something. How does that work? Well, when you look over something, it's as if your eye, there's a metaphor that seeing is touching, where your eyes sort of go out and touch something. So you can say, he ran his eyes over the wall, or his eyes picked out every detail, right? It's as though your eye beams, or you can say of two lovers, their eyes met, right? Their eyes came together, right? When you're looking over a paper, here's a paper, you have writing, here's an eye, you have an eye, okay? And you have eye beams that are going over this in detail. That's looking it over, it's covering it, okay? It's like walking over the bridge or something like that. It's going over this. Now, to overlook something is, let's suppose here's the thing. To overlook it is that the eye beams go over them where there's no contact and you don't see it. Okay? Now, there's a difference between overlook and oversee. To oversee something is to watch all of the actions of somebody to make sure that they're doing it correctly. So you're covering the actions, going over. And what you find in use after use of this in language is that each particular word takes a particular metaphor for over and a metaphor for look and see, and puts those metaphors together to get a meaning of that word. You can't predict what the word will mean from over and look, but you do know that one of the senses of over is going to be used and one of the metaphorical senses of look will be used, or literal sense of look, and that they will be put together. So the meaning is motivated by the system of metaphors, but not predictable. You have to learn it, but it's not learning something random. Overlook cannot mean to eat. Overlook cannot mean to step on something, right? There's only certain possibilities for overlook. And when you work on English and you look at prepositions going together with verbs, you get incredible complexity. It must drive language learners crazy, right, to look at prepositions and verbs together in English, right? One of the hardest things to teach. But what's happening is they are using the system. They're using the metaphor system. And they're using the metaphor system for both the prepositions and for the verbs. And once you see how that system works, you can explain it a lot better. But it's not easy to see. It's a very big, complicated system. Okay? So I wanted to just give you a sense of this. We could go through other examples. If you have particular examples that are confusing to you, we can talk about them. I may or may not understand them. But basically, that's how things work. Okay, let's talk just a bit about poetry. I wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of how poetic metaphors work. Just a few examples. I'm going to later on give a one of my lectures will be just on poetic metaphor. But I wanted to give a few examples so that you see how complicated poetic metaphor is. But also, the thing to remember about poetic metaphor is that for the most part, it uses this system. It uses all the basic primary metaphors that we have, all the conventional metaphors that we already have, and it extends them and puts them together in interesting ways. Poetic metaphors are not original. They are original combinations of things already known. Okay? So, let me give you, okay. There's a great Shakespeare poem, Sonnet 73, and it's about death. But it doesn't say it's about death. And the question is, how do you know it's about death? It says, "That time of year thou mayst in me behold." That is, that time of year when you can see in me. "When yellow leaves, or none, or few," that is, yellow leaves, or none, or few, "do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang." Okay? Then he goes on. "In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all unrest." Third part. "In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well, which thou must leave ere long." Now, a lot of complicated English, but let's just look at, this would take days to unpack all these metaphors. But let's just take a couple. The first, "That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves." What time of year do the leaves turn yellow? Autumn. Okay? There's a metaphor. A lifetime is a year. And winter is death, and autumn is old age. Okay? And notice, "When yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold." Right? Shivering old man. Okay? But a lifetime is a year, autumn is old age, winter is death. Okay? "In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west." Okay. The twilight of a day. A lifetime is a day. What part of a lifetime is twilight? Old age near death. It's after sunset. The sun is already set. Darkness, night, not quite night yet, but night is death. Sunset is period of old age before death. Okay? Third, "In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie." Okay, youth is when you've piled up the wood in the fire and it's still fresh wood. When it becomes ashes, going to old age. You still have some coals burning, but it's old age. Now, let's just take that. Here you have a lifetime is a fire. Youth is when the fire is burning brightly. Old age is when you get ashes and you have maybe a few coals still burning. Okay? So you have three different metaphors for a lifetime. A lifetime is a day, as a year, a lifetime is a day, and a lifetime is a fire. why those three? And why do they make sense? And not only that, what are the primary metaphors here? Are those primary metaphors or not? Well, notice, and why not something else? Why not a lifetime is a week? Doesn't work, right? Some of them just don't work. A lifetime is an apple. No. And you can't just have any. Fire works, year works, day works. A lifetime, is a bottle cap. No. Right. So which ones work, which ones don't? Now, think about a year, a day, and a fire, and how they're in parallel. Right? In each case, there's heat and then cold. Death is cold. Life is heat in all of them. That metaphor, that death is cold and life is heat, is an experiential metaphor. Dead people turn cold. People are alive or warm. So what you have is a correlation in experience that gives rise to a primary metaphor. Life is heat, death is cold. First. What else happens? In a day, you have death is night. Well, night can be cold, colder than day, and also night is dark. Right? Winter, things get dark early. It's darker early. So, you have life is light and death is dark. The same thing with a fire. The fire is glowing, it's light, ashes, it's dark. Life is light, death is dark in all three of these. And then all of them have a cycle, a waxing and a waning cycle. That is, during the day, it sort of gets bigger, and sort of you get more of the day until noon, and then it sort of goes away. There's what is called waxing and waning. It's getting more intense, less intense. During the year, it goes up to summer, and then through autumn and winter. More intense, less intense. And a fire burns, gets more intense, and then burns down, gets less intense. So you have cycles of intensity in all three. A lifetime is a cycle of intensity. In the prime of life, you have the most intensity. As you get older, you have less intensity. Okay? All three of those have those three metaphors put together. You put them together in an understanding of a year, an understanding of life as a year, life as a day, and life as a fire. Right? That is, those three metaphors, life as a year, life as a day, life as a fire, are like complex metaphors derived from the composition of life is light, death is dark, life is warm, death is cold, life is a cycle of intensity. All those structure, all those three metaphors structure the other metaphors. That's why this poem has exactly those three metaphors. It was a poet. Right? That's why the poem makes sense as a beautiful poem, in addition to all the other metaphors that he was using. Okay. What you see in this is that the metaphors are not obvious in the words. It's not just going through the words. It's not just saying, well, this is a metaphorical sentence. That time of year thou mayst in me behold. Maybe, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang. There are words that are used metaphorically in this, but the idea is to evoke a metaphorical idea. And not just one idea, complex metaphorical ideas that use the basic system of metaphors, of primary metaphors, and call them up and evoke them. Right? That's why this poem works. That's what a poet is doing. Poets are not just using single metaphorical words where this is a literal meaning and then it has a single metaphorical meaning. It's not like that. The words are prompts to deep metaphorical understandings. Okay? So, I think with that, I'm going to stop, let you try to digest some of this, and hope that we don't have too much regurgitation afterwards. And we'll go take questions in a little while. Thank you.